drive a car.
Yeah,
It's cool.
which is a funny thing because I'm the one responsible for doing the recording, so you would think I would have picked up on that. I was just saying a big happy birthday to Zara when she hears the
And to
recording.
Karina, it's Karina's birthday today too.
Really?
Yes,
Get out of here. Well, happy birthday to Karina as well. Oh, that's
yes,
so funny. Both their birthdays.
yes. So actually, Zara's coming over to visit my house to visit me tomorrow.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Beautiful. I
it'll
love
be
it.
good. Vikram is with us. Vikram Ram, how are you? He's connecting.
He's connecting. Oh man, Lance,
Okay. Yes.
I'm healthy now.
Oh, good.
I really wondered this morning.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, we should get started with our opening prayers. So, Matt, would you like to do the opening prayers this evening?
Yeah, sure. All right. Altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dang warje pedra no parje pege. Tarpa dang tam shakin pe ba dujo parje pa tam shaki soje pe. Manam kadang nyam pe sim chin tam she de wa dang den. Dug now dang drel nur du la na me pa yang dang par zog pe shang shu brim po she to parja. Action Bodhicitta. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du song marge gi ba du lu nagi somge wala ko. Ma she ba du lu nagi samge wala ko. Du de ring ne sung te ni ma song ta sam gi ba du lu nagi samge wa la ko. Long Refuge Prayer. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Transcend sawadangu parje pe palden la madampa nam la kyab suchiyo. Yidam kil korgi la so nam la kyab suchiyo. Sangye chom dende nam la kyab suchiyo. Dampe cho nam la kyab suchiyo. Pape ge dun nam la kyab suchiyo. Pawo kadro chok yong song me song yeshe gi chen dang den pa nam la kyab su chi yo. Taking the Bodhisattva vow. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to Bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Shangshu Ningpor Ji Bar Sangye Namla Kyab Suchi Chodang Shangshu Senpai Soglang Deshin Kabsuchi Jitar Nongi Deshegi Shangshu Tuni Ki Padang Shangshu Sempe La Pala Dedag Vrimshin Nepatar Deshindrola Pendondu Shangshu Semni Kigizing Deshinduni La Pala Rimpa Shindu La Pargio. Short refuge prayer. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Jiangshu Badu Dagni Kyabsuchi Dagi Jinsu Ki Pe Sonam Ki Drola Penshir Sangye Drupasho. The Four Measurables. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness in the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. Excuse me. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadang yam pesem chintam she de wadang dewe gudan den pa jorchi. Dug now dang du now gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dug now me pe de wadang mi drawar jorchi. Ne ring chak dang ni dang drawe tang nyam la ne par jorchi. We're doing the Vajrasattva tonight as well. Om Vajrasattva Samaya. Help to protect my vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind, heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the four joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realization of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajra Sattva Teno Patishta Jido Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anurakto Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sarva Karma Susami Sitan Shriya Kuru Hom Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Munsa Vajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sarvaha Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajra Sattva Teno Patishta Drido Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sarva Karma Susami Sitan Shriya Kuru Hom Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Munsa Vajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattvaha Om Vajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajra Sattva Teno Patishta Drido Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarva Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sarva Karma Susami Sitan Shriya Kuru Hom Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Vajra Mame Munsa Vajri Bhava Maha Samaya Sattva. In the Sagarmati Requested Sutra. Likewise, be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food and drink peacefully, enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated.
Very good. Thank you. The melodies were right on. Okay. So we are talking about the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, and we're still working on chapter 9, the chapter on Bodhicitta. So we'll continue with this. Before we start, does anybody have any questions or comments that you'd like to make? Anything that you'd like to raise up as a topic for another time?
I would probably, for another time, I'm sure, but would like to talk more about emptiness and understanding emptiness at some point. Something I've been thinking more about.
Okay, by all means. Yes, that's very good. I will make a big note about that. And I'm sure that here in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, there's a section on that. Did you have a specific question, or just generally you'd like to be able to explore emptiness, talk about it?
I guess it's something I've studied some in the past. I guess in general, but was specifically thinking about it more. I've been doing readings and listening to things more about deity yoga and the importance of that, and it's particularly like with Tsongkhapa and how he explains the importance of the relationship of like deity yoga and emptiness and things. So it's something I've been thinking more about. It's a very tough thing to grasp conceptually a lot of times.
Okay,
right when I think I understand it and I have it in some way, then it slips out of my fingers. But I guess it's the point maybe on some level, but I don't know.
Sure. Yeah, well, it is a big topic and an abstract topic. So let's say that for another time when we can really look at it from different points of view and so on and really explore it. So, unless somebody else has anything else you'd like to add or say about that, following the outline book that we have, if we can go to page 20, which is in this section of chapter. Wait a minute. Excuse me, just a second. Well, yes, page 20, it's actually, it's in the middle of the book, but it's got these definitions in here. And the point that I wanted to make, draw your attention to, is that in most all the different books that we use, there's a glossary in the back of the book. And sometimes the glossary is the most valuable part of the book itself because it's very concise. You know, you're thinking about a word, you look it up, and there's a very pointed translation or meaning of that particular word. So in here, page 20 in this outline book, I've created a very short, little 8 or 9, 10 words or something like that of a glossary. But if you've got a copy of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation itself, and you go to page 427, there you'll find a very good glossary. And so many of the other books, like I said, have glossaries in them. And sometimes they're pointed at outer meaning, sometimes inner meaning, and so on, sometimes a little bit of both. So they're very good. So it should be a first your go-to when you're thinking of a particular word. Well, what's in the glossary? So just as Matt just brought up, emptiness, it's just got one sentence, a very short thing. It says, the lack of inherent reality of a phenomena or person. So that's certainly the essence of it. But at the same time, there's many other different aspects to it that we can talk about that will help make emptiness more luminous to us, that we'll be able to understand more about what this means. So I point this out. So if we look to page 20 now in our outline book, it's got some definitions here that have been relevant to the topics that we've been talking about recently and that we continue to talk about. So the main question is, who is an example of bodhicitta? We've been talking about bodhicitta these past couple of 3 weeks. So who's an example of that? So the answer to that is the Buddhas and the noble bodhisattvas. So all the Buddhas, the Tathagatas, the thus gone ones, the such gone ones, so on. These are the Buddhas, those who have completely realized what it is to be a complete human being and have transcended to the level of what we call the awakened one or the Buddha. And the noble bodhisattvas have bodhicitta within them as well. They are the 8 great bodhisattvas that we've talked about many times. So Kshitigarbha, the bodhisattva Maitreya, Akasagarbha, the bodhisattva Samantabhadra, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, Vajrapani, and Sarvanavarana Vishkabin are the 8 great bodhisattvas. So they are on the path to become Buddha, and they have achieved enlightenment within themselves, and they've developed bodhicitta, and so on. But they remain as great examples, perfect examples of what it is to be a human being on the path to be able to master the Dharma and to become Buddha. So they are the perfections of being a human being on the path to become Buddha. So that's the noble bodhisattvas. So when you want to know who are the examples, that's where you look. So in deity yoga, deity here is explained as the essence of the inner true nature of all sentient beings that we call Buddha. So the deity is the essence of the inner true nature within our heart center, our inner true nature of all sentient beings that we call Buddha. So the example we always use is this diamond that has these many facets, and the diamond is made up of bodhicitta. That's what it's composed of in this example. So all these different facets are the different Buddhas and the different bodhisattvas that are emanations of this bodhicitta. So it's their activities that are being characterized by each of these different facets. So each of these different facets would have a different name, which would be a Buddha or one of these great bodhisattvas. And so that we're learning about their activities in order that we may recognize those activities within ourselves, that we can conduct ourselves, that our conduct, our behavior becomes like them, becomes like those perfect Buddhas and so on. So we're visualizing this as the wish-fulfilling jewel within ourselves. So these are the deities. So it's not something out there. It's not like a god or a goddess or something like that. It is within ourselves, these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that are the holy enlightened mind, the Bodhicitta. So this is the essence of the inner true nature of ourselves, of sentient beings that we call Buddha. So deities are expressed in many meditational forms that enable human beings to familiarize themselves with the qualities and activities of the enlightened mind of a Buddha or Bodhisattva. So all the different iconography, the pictures I've got behind myself and that are around this room, and other books that you might be able to get that have lots of different deity pictures and so on. And I've sent you a package, where you had, about 10 or 15 pictures of different deities and so on. These are the characterizations, these are the illustrations of those facets of this diamond. And so they represent the activities of that Buddha nature. So it helps us to familiarize ourselves with that. Meditation is also sometimes referred to as a familiarization with that transcendent holy mind, that our natural mind, our inner true nature mind, the bodhicitta. So we're familiarizing ourselves with it. It's been there the whole time. It never goes away. But we tend to block it up. We obscure it with our emotions, with our confusions, with our misconceptions, our mental misconceptions, our habitual tendencies. All of that is what blocks up this holy enlightened mind. So by learning about these deities and practicing these sadhana practices of becoming these deities is how we are breaking through those obscurations. That we're seeing how these pure beings, these pure realized beings, have been able to overcome whatever negativities there are, to be able to overcome the emotions and so on, and break through and be the living examples of what it is, this bodhicitta, and all of its different ways in which it manifests. So this is what a deity is. So we've brought this question up before, and I didn't think about this particular part, but here it is. So now we have something to refer to. So having these glossaries and so on is really good. And actually, what I've done, and maybe you might want to do in your own way, is to compile your own glossary. I use the Excel spreadsheet on my computer. And years ago, I started, taking all these words and started putting them together with their meanings and everything. And I was able to, list them in their Tibetan form. I was able to list them in their Sanskrit form and list them in their English form. And then I sorted them in different ways so I could look at it. If I had an English word, I want to know what it is in Tibetan or what it is in Sanskrit. I could do that. If I wanted, if I had a Tibetan word, I wanted to know what it was. I could do that. So I had 3 different booklets that had these different glossaries in these different languages. So it became very helpful to me in learning, more and more and more about the Dharma and the Tibetan way of life and so on, the culture. I'll say also that years ago, I enjoyed puzzles. I enjoyed figuring things out, and it came to me, well, I could spend all my time or a lot of time trying to teach myself the Tibetan language to whatever degree I can. And what I realized was it took a lot of time to do that. And so I made a choice whether I should do that or I should direct my time to the Dharma itself. And that's what I did. I said it was more important to learn and practice the Dharma than it was to learn and practice the Tibetan language. Because the language could have been Sanskrit as well. It could have been the Hindi language as well, because the Buddhism is expressed in all those different languages. So it's best to know it in your own language first, or primarily, or and most importantly, because that's our language that we're born into and so on. But to become familiar with the Tibetan, to become familiar with the Sanskrit and so on, is very, very, very beneficial for the reasons we've talked about before, harmonizing with the vibration and so on. So anyway, so I'm just pointing this out, that these are decisions that I made, and whether or not it means anything to you and whether or not it'd be helpful to you.
Guys, a question
So,
real quick,
sure.
just because it's related to at least the deity part, and I'm sure you've explained this to me before, but in the long refuge prayer where it says we take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams,
Yes.
it never makes sense to me, because I would be using the word deities and Yidams to me that would mean the same thing. So like,
Yes.
I don't, when it says like the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams,
Yes.
I don't understand what that means really.
Okay. Well, the deities are explained here.
Yeah.
Okay. The Yidams are the tutelary deities, our tutors. So what we do is we choose a particular deity as our Yidam for some period of time, where we are kind of using that particular deity as a lens by which we're looking at Bodhicitta, we're looking at all the other bodhisattvas, we're looking at all the Buddhas, we're looking at all the Dharma and everything through that lens of that particular deity. So whether it's Medicine Buddha, the healing deity, whether it's Manjushri, the wisdom deity, or it's Avalokitesvara Shenrezig, the compassion deity, etc., it becomes like our main deity. And so for a period of time, you're using that deity, that Yidam, and then maybe you find that you move to a point where you say, well, I want to explore it from another point of view, so I take on another deity. So you can have many different Yidams over a period of time. but it's best to stay with one Yidam for quite a while to be able to. If you're jumping from one to another, it's harder to be able to focus. So, how's the phrase go? To the deities and
In refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams.
right. So the mandalas are their palaces.
Right.
So we've talked about that before, where all the the different levels of the mandala are all the different bodhisattvas and dakinis, all the other holy enlightened beings that have come onto the path, that we brought onto the path to help us to get to the pinnacle of that particular mandala, which would be in the center actually, as the deity. The main deity would be at the center of that, and all the periphery would be all those deities that were pointing to that were leading us to that. Is that making some kind of sense?
If I could say something about the Tibetan here, the Tibetan is pretty clear. You go
Okay.
to the verse, it says, Yidam Kyokorgi Latsok Namla Kapsucho. Namla Kapsucho just means I take refuge, right? That's in all the verses. And Yidam is Yidam, which Lance just explained. Kyokorgi, the Yidams of the mandala, the Yidams of the mandala. Latsog, the assembly of deities. So it's saying we take refuge in the Yidams of the mandala, who are the assembly of deities. So it's just a synonym. The deities and the Yidams are just two synonyms for saying the same thing. It's just probably they do it that way just to get the right number of syllables in the line, but because it's verse and they have to have the same number of syllables in each line. But there's no confusion in the Tibetan. It's just Latsok is assembly of deities. Yidam also is deity. So just two words referring to the same thing.
Bernie, if I had to push you to say that sense of the prayer in another way that would make sense, what would it be? Just want to make sure I understand that.
Well, if I were translating it from scratch, I would say I take refuge in the assembly of deities who are the Yidams of the mandala.
Okay.
Guys,
Mark wanted to say something. I don't want to overlook.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Thank you. I take the Medicine Buddha as my deity for now. And as you say, best to spend quite a long time with one's deity or one's taken deity before saying, I wish to know more from someone else or some other deity, more properly put. But all I know of the Medicine Buddha, it seems very, very small. How do I expand that? I don't know what more to do, but to read what you've provided to us.
Well, there's many books on all these different deities and yidams and so on like that. There's many books. So, to open yourself up to explore, what scriptures there are, what books there are, what there are. There's a great sutra on the Medicine Buddha, that you can read and practice. So intellectually, we can gather all this information. And that's wonderful. That's a very important part of this. But then the second part is to allow yourself to do the practice and to have the transcendent experience of recognizing that deity within yourself. And then that knowledge begins to come up. You begin to see the source of that knowledge as within yourself, because we all have that Buddha nature. We all have this within ourselves. So when we can focus our mind one pointed mindfully, then we're cutting through those blockages, and all this wisdom just keeps pumping up, keeps coming up. So it's both things.
I think I need to work with you privately on this. What you're saying is very reasonable, but still very mystifying to me.
Well, what's mystifying about getting books and reading and studying books?
Which book? What study? That's what I'm asking you.
Okay, well then there's a great source, and we can talk about this privately, like you said. But if you want to know the sutras, I'm in love with the sutras right now. I think it's really great. And so the sutras, there's a website called 84,000, 84000. And you go into the keyword and you say medicine Buddha, and bam, all this stuff pops up that has to do with the medicine Buddha.
I can do that online?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's an
yeah.
online service that is magnificent. It's really great. So so I print those sutras that I want to read, because I don't have Kindle. I like having books. I like making notes and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
But you do it your own way. But you can download the sutra and you can read it at your leisure on your iPad or whatever it is that you have. So we
Okay.
can do that. We can do that together when next time we get together personally.
Yeah, I'd like that. I really would.
Okay.
I feel so much of this is esoteric and not immediate to me. Do you know what I mean?
I do, but you've got to hook onto it. You know,
I agree. Yes.
you got to hook onto it. So the question you asked, you see, is what is a hook. You know,
Yeah.
so, okay, we need to work on that.
Indeed.
So your spiritual friends will help you do that. But if you didn't ask the question, you know, it wouldn't be answered for you. So the mysticism is not asking the question, but still having this idea that it's remote and you can't get it. All you got to do is ask the question, knock on the door, and the door will be opened.
Yes. 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 Thank you very, very much for that answer. And yes, I look forward to working with you and getting more direction from you about it.
And remember that the lamas, you know, who are far deeper trained than I will be in this lifetime and so on, are available. And there's Bernie and there's Pete and other brothers and sisters that you'll meet, you know, that become resources for us all.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we have to take the initiative is the bottom line to this, to overcome, to break through the mysticism. We don't want it to be a mystery. You know, and this is I think this is an important point, because
yes, but sometimes hard to believe because it is very mysterious and esoteric.
Well, until you understand it better, then it becomes very real. It becomes very, very, very within yourself. You become the embodiment of that. You recognize it within yourself.
That is what I seek. And that's why I'm so happy to be here with everyone.
And that's why I think, you know, our practice and study of the Buddhism is so great, because it's so articulate in that. And it is so willing to share all that information. And not to disparage other traditions, but some traditions, you know, prefer to keep it a mystery, or you have to be at some particular kind of level before you can be exposed to these kinds of things, you know. And in Buddhism, it's available to everybody. You just, you know, but you have to take the initiative to get there sometimes.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
So, Bernie, would you like to comment on anything? You know, okay.
I'm sorry, I can't say anything more than what you just said. I just thought I would do the translation of the verse. It was pretty clear, so
Okay.
it wasn't.
No,
The
that was
pattern is pretty clear in that particular prayer, so you don't need to
Okay.
have any doubts about what it says. Different people will translate different things, and it's also translated that way to make it read better when you recite it. But there's no confusion with what it actually says.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So in this list that I've got on page 20 here, so the next word is yoga. So we've talked about this many times, and yoga is a Sanskrit word that simply means union or a yoke, to join. So a yoke would go over the animal, the beast of burden that is pulling the cart or whatever, the plowshare or whatever it is. So it's the union with the instrument that is behind the beast of burden, the animal that is pulling. So it's becoming in union with that. So we see that what we're learning to do is to become in union with our understanding of what our true nature is in all of its many different forms and so on, all the different aspects of the diamond and stuff like that. So it's very simple, yoga. So yogi is one who is in union, and yogini is a female yogi. So it's very logical, very simple stuff. So it just means simply union. Then Buddha is the awakened one, is the most common, simple, to the point understanding. So what is the Buddha awakened of is all things, is omnipresent, all knowing, all at one time, everywhere, simultaneously, where there's no difference in time. It's all the same time. Time has no real meaning. It is a concept that human beings have developed for themselves, as all these words are, and so on, are conceptual words that are helping us to understand. The Buddha is the awakened one who is beyond the concepts, who is that non-dualistic, non-conceptual, non-objectifiable. So that is within ourselves. The Buddha is not something that's out there, and there's not one Buddha, who's like the supreme being who created all this. It is that we are. It is our absolute self. It is our true nature, the awakened one. So this is what we are trying to arouse, our recognition of that. So it says, attained unsurpassable, complete, perfect enlightenment, the Buddha. So it's a perfectly realized human being. Then the Bodhisattva is the enlightenment being, one who generates bodhicitta, a bodhisattva. So bodhi is a Sanskrit word that means enlightenment, and sat is a being, and sattva is a holy being. So it's the holy enlightened being. So the bodhicitta is bodhi, is the enlightenment, and citta means the heart mind. The heart mind. So it's the holy enlightened mind. So the holy enlightened mind, the bodhicitta, is what the Buddhas and what the Bodhisattvas are, their essence. So we have that potential within ourselves, but again, it's blocked up. So the next word was bodhicitta. It says the enlightened mind, the desire to achieve perfect, complete enlightenment for others' benefit. So that's the relative bodhicitta. And the absolute bodhicitta would be to be that non-conceptual, to be that non-dual, to be that, to be the embodiment of that. So then the Buddhafield is defined as the existences created by Buddhas wherein conditions are perfect for the attainment of enlightenment by its inhabitants. Many practitioners aspire to rebirth in this state because reversion to the lower states is impossible. This is also called the Pure Lands. So I also want to note that these definitions came out of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. I may have added a phrase or a word or something to try and make it a little bit more relative to our puny minds, but nevertheless, the words themselves, the definitions come from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So this Buddhafield, going back to that again, this is created, existence is created by Buddhas wherein conditions are perfect for the attainment of enlightenment. So the Buddhists, to become Buddhas, they had to go through this whole process of good actions, being different aspects, being these different deities themselves, being these different bodhisattvas, engaging in these different practices. The Buddhas are the penultimate realization of all these combined things, beings that are activities that are on the mandala, that are within the Buddhafield. So the Buddhafield becomes everything that we as human beings would see, hear, and feel, and so on like that. To the Buddha, it is who they are. It is what they are. The Buddha becomes all this. We become the vibration. We become that non-dual, that non-conceptual, that non-objectifiable. That's the Buddhafield. So we catch glimpses of that as we do our practices, as we do our studies. We can be reading something, and all of a sudden, an epiphany comes. All of a sudden, a light bulb goes off in our minds, in our heart, opens up just by reading something. It just breaks right through. We can have that kind of an experience when we're meditating, and so we say that that's our rebirth, that it forever changes us. Have you ever had an experience that you can never take it away from yourself? Nobody can take it away from you, and it is something that has forever changed you. And you can always point to it and say, it's because of that I am who I am today, that particular event. But then there was another event, and there was another event that all, together, made me who I am today. So the Buddhafield is all those things combined. So we each have. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It just was making me think it was interesting because last night I was watching a talk by Robert Thurman, and there's some other guy he was with talking about Vajrayana type stuff. And he was, I don't have a good enough memory to say what the sutra was or how exactly it went, but he was talking about a sutra from kind of the early Buddhist Theravada even type of sutra where they were saying kind of a precursor in a sense, or already signs of the Vajrayana type of approach even in those sutras, but where the Buddha was with, I don't know if it was Shariputra or Nanda, one of his disciples, who was talking about how terrible samsara was that they were both looking out on, and how horrible, and he's got to escape. And the Buddha was saying that he's viewing the same exact thing as nirvana, as what would basically in the same way of what we'd call Buddhafield in this tradition. That, and it makes me think of how you describe it, or at least I was thinking about it in the sense of like it being within us, that it, because I even noticed myself, like I tend to reify or objectify these things of like, oh, like there's this place I'm gonna, like, are they saying there's this place I would go to, and then everyone, but it's like it's more subtle than that, or more of an internal thing, something. It just make me think. I don't know, it's interesting to me.
Yes, absolutely, you're right. It's all within ourselves, and we each, as each Buddha has their Buddhafield, we create our own Buddhafield. So all the studies that we're doing, all the experiences we're having become, the component parts of our mandala. So I had somebody who I used to talk to who started making her own mandala. She started reflecting back on all those points, those points of breakthrough, and listing them and everything, and creating her own mandala that way. So whether it was experiences or whether it was readings that she did, or it was Buddha or Bodhisattva experiences that she had, she was doing that. It was very interesting that she did it that way. So then the next word here is, oh, wait a minute, before I go away, conditions, I want to finish this with the Buddhafield. Existences created by Buddhas wherein conditions are perfect for the attainment of enlightenment by its inhabitants. Many practitioners aspire to rebirth in this state, became reversion. What's that say? Many practitioners aspire to rebirth in this state because reversion to the lower states is impossible. So so when you reach a certain threshold, that moving backwards, becomes impossible, or it seems impossible, because we have reached a level of non-corruption, a level of purity that now, we can, that merit that we talked about last time. We were talking about merit became so rich that it was like a protection, a self-protection of not falling backwards, of not falling away, not falling into the lower realms. That you would hold your place and maybe go further on from that. So that's the idea behind that. So Buddha nature, the pure essence potential to attain enlightenment that is inherent in every sentient being. It is obscured to varying degrees by afflicting emotions and subtle obscurations, but it can be actualized through the practice of moral ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So what this is saying is that we can recognize our Buddha nature through our studies, through our practices, through the teachings and so on, is how we approach this purity of being able to get to that point where we leave all this behind because we don't need it anymore. The analogy we know of the we have the ocean or the river of suffering, and we have to cross to the other side. The other side is bodhicitta, is enlightenment, is liberation. And we build a boat, or we find a boat, or we buy a boat, or we rent a boatman or something to take us across the river or the ocean of suffering. And when we get to the other side, we no longer need the boat. We don't need it anymore. So this Buddha nature is that realization, is what that is realizing that we had it the whole time. We had that Buddha nature within us the whole time, but it was all blocked up. It was all confused by our afflicting emotions, by our subtle obscurations, the subtle obscuration of wisdom, thinking that as a human being, I can know everything. That becomes such a hang up. Oh, I got to know. I want to know more, instead of just relaxing and just letting the natural wisdom come up by itself. All that we need to know is within ourselves, but we think we always need to know more, and it becomes the ring in our nose that forces us to develop, maintain all the emotions that we have and so on like that, because everything then becomes, we become vulnerable to all these emotions as we're trying to develop this wisdom that is unobtainable. The unattainable, how do we used to say that? Unobtainium, unobtainium. It was the special element, unobtainium. So it says it can be actualized through the practices of moral ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So the practices, but to get to the level of the practices, we got to have an understanding, a knowledge of what the practices are and so on. So there's that study aspect. We talk about that. There's in our prayer book, when we look at the Dekurma prayer, on page 20 in our prayer book, and the last line, it says, where it says, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. So it's through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation, and churning that, keep going through that process, that we are able to attain the end of samsara, not for everybody else, but for ourselves. We can attain our own nirvana. We can radiate that. That's what we want to do. We want to radiate that. We're not selfishly holding on to it, greedily holding on to it, and not sharing it with others. But we want to be able to do that. So, but until the end of our samsara implies that we have reached nirvana. So we catch glimpses of it, over and over again. So if you've been through, these teachings, you've been through reading and so on, and every few months, every year, you continue on with this for years and so on, you begin to see the turning of the wheel. You begin to see where, oh yes, the improvements that I made, the times that I've broken through my misconceptions, I've broken through the mysteries, I've broken through, and now I'm at a higher level. I've realized more. I'm at a higher level now. So I'm that much closer. I have attained that much of nirvana. I have broken through that much of samsara. And then the next line is sentient beings, all conscious creatures who are reborn within the six realms: the God realm, the demigod realm, the human realm, the animal god, the animal realm, the hungry ghost, and the hell realms. Sentient beings. So here it's referring to human beings, but I think in a broader sense, you'll see that the sentient beings would also include the animal realm, and I guess animals, insects, and so on like that. Other sentient beings who have a lifetime, who have some kind of a birth. They're prone to sickness or illness or injury or something like that. The suffering from that. They have the old age where they begin to deteriorate and suffer as a result of that, and finally death and suffer from the death. So this is, many times considered to be the definition of a sentient being. One who is born, goes through these vicissitudes, and then finally has a death, and that's a sentient being. And then the Tathagata is a Sanskrit word that means thus gone ones, thus gone. They have thus gone, never to return. They have gone through all the stages of being a human being, going through all the stages of being a practitioner, of being a yogi, of being a bodhisattva, and then made the transition, the transcendence, to becoming an awakened one, to becoming a Buddha. They're thus gone, never to return. In anything less than the Tathagata state. Their light is still shining. Their luminance is being manifested. through their radiance and so on. So it's still it's there, but now it is part of what all this is. It can't be separated from the phenomenal nature or the absolute nature. It is the phenomenal nature. It is the absolute nature. And they are the thus gone ones. So the Sugatas mean the well gone ones. Sugatas are the well gone ones. That another way of saying thus gone, well gone. They have gone through all these changes, and as a result, they have this well existence, this this bearing of being well gone. They were well gone. They went through this process very beautifully. So these are just 10 words or so that are out of this glossary of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So the point here is to say that there's these glossaries and to look at those, and the different appendices that'll be in these books are great. Not to mention the table of contents and the indexes. Okay. Any further comments or questions about any of that? Okay. So we have these great resources. Were you aware of the resources? Were you aware of the glossary in the books?
I was not.
Yeah. Do you have a copy of this book? The Jewel Ornament of Liberation? The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. This one here. Yeah. Do you have a copy of this, Matt?
I do not have a copy of that. No.
Okay. Well,
I do. I have like the Kindle version where I kind of wish I had
Okay.
the other one, to be honest. But yeah, that's what I.
does it have the glossary in there too?
I'm sure it does. I'd have to look at it. I haven't looked at it, to be honest, but yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're continuing then on the topic of bodhicitta. And so back on page 17 of the outline book, we're talking about the causes of the cultivation of bodhicitta. The causes of cultivation. In other words, what is it that inspires us? What are the causes for us as individually to cultivate bodhicitta? So this is pointing this out. So it says this is the aspiration to benefit others. This is the relative cause. So it says these 4 things, these 4 points here, which are very important. I don't think it's necessary to memorize these things together with all the other things that we do need to memorize, but it's good to have this in our mind somewhere, or in our alphabetical lists of things that we keep notes for. One of the things that I've found in my iPhone is a folder that is called Notes. I don't know if you guys got that on your phones or whatever, but I use that for all these different things that I want to reference at one time or another. 4 of these, 3 of those, what bodhicitta is, all these, to get the definition. So if my mind is lapsed for a moment, I can go to this and I can recall it right away, so it's better than my brain sometimes, but it's very, very, very helpful. So using all these tools is magnificent. These books are tools. They're magnificent. The Malabeads are tools. They're all tools of the method to be able to put oneself on the pathway of the Dharma to liberation, to enlightenment. So utilizing all these tools is what a very wise person does, I think. To rely on oneself without any of these tools, it's going to be very frustrating. You can't remember it all. So, so anyway, these four causes for the cultivation of bodhicitta are very revealing. The first one is the perfect noble family. So, what is the perfect noble family? So we've talked about this. We've talked about the 5 Buddha families. We've talked about the 8 noble bodhisattvas. So all this is all part of the perfect noble family, the family of the Buddha, the way in which it's broken down for us, and so on, the way it's been articulated for us. In essence, it's non-conceptual. You have to be a Buddha to be in that Buddha mind to be able to be that. But for those of us who can't be there, we need to be able to approach it, from our human nature, from our human way. So the wisdom of the Buddha is such that it makes it available to us through what we call the Dharmakaya. The Sambhogakaya. The Sambhogakaya is the enjoyment body of the Buddha, which I interpret as the intellectualization of what this all is. But it's all just conceptual stuff. It's all this iconography. It's all the statues. It's all these things that are characteristic of the different aspects of what this absolute nature is trying to present to us, is trying to say, this is what you are part of. It's like taking a prism and shining white light through it. And then when you do that, on the other end comes the color spectrum. So first we just saw the white light. Then when it's broken down, then you see the spectrum. So the Sambhogakaya is like that spectrum, is a metaphor for that. So the perfect noble family could be described as all those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the Sambhogakaya, all the different deities and so on like that. Bernie, would you have another way of looking at that?
No, not really. No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, you're giving a pretty good explanation, Lance. You shouldn't think that I have anything better, really. So,
well, I never know, because in many ways I've learned lots of things from Bernie.
Technical, I might know something different, but basically, you're giving the explanation that goes along with what's in the text. So,
okay. So the second part of the causes of cultivation is to fully attend the Buddha, Bodhisattvas, and spiritual master. So what does this mean? It means to be a son or a daughter of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, that we have this level of respect as we would our father and our mother and our family elders and so on. We look at them as our teachers, as the greatest teachers that we could possibly imagine, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and the spiritual master. The spiritual master is the one who is present for us in a form that we can recognize, that we can have a conversation with. So usually we would think of that as being a human being, but there are plenty of examples and stories of the way in which this wisdom has manifested in different animals and different situations and so on, for a specific purpose, for a specific human being to familiarize themselves so that they could see themselves in this pure light, in this pure way. So without going into too many stories about that, Just let it suffice that the spiritual master is one who presents themselves with the wisdom, the guidance, and the protection to be able to maintain your study and practices. So that's a cause for the cultivation. The Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, and the spiritual master. And then number 3 is cultivating compassion for all sentient beings. That we recognize that we aren't alone. We're all together, with all these other beings, all these other human beings and so on. And we're in this, strata of some that are greater to us for many different reasons. There are some that we might consider to be lesser than us for many different reasons. And there are some who are our peers for many different reasons and so on. So we may have a sense of compassion for the ones who are, we think, inferior to ourselves. We have compassion for, they're not as smart as we are. They're not born as free as we are. They don't have the intelligence that we have, or something like that. And we have compassion for them. There might be those that are above us. They may have lots of money. They may have lots of power, but meanwhile, they have no heart. They're using their power and their money, their wealth, for selfish reasons and so on. And we have compassion for that. And we have compassion for, our brothers and sisters on this peer level, because they don't recognize who we are. They don't recognize what we're talking about here, the spirituality and so on. So we have compassion for them. So for us to develop this compassion for all these different beings, you see, is what leads us to bodhicitta. And sometimes we have to develop that compassion. I know for myself, it's a difficult thing to maintain that, to say, I gotta break through, my selfishness or my narcissism or whatever that makes me just think of myself and not be thinking of other people and so on. So we have to, that's part of what we're accumulating in the very beginning is our wisdom and our skillful means in being able to break through and being able to develop the wisdom and the method, the skillful means to be able to exercise that method, to exercise that wisdom and so on. So cultivating the compassion for sentient beings, looking for sentient beings as to who they are, what they're going through, and realizing that they're missing this or that, or maybe we might think that they're missing this or that. They actually have it, and we're the one that's missing it. So to be able to look at this through compassion, through the eyes of compassion. So this is an example of the Yidam, that through the eyes of the Yidam, through the activity of that particular deity, your tutelary deity, that you are looking at all beings as being this, that, or the other thing, ignorant or jealous or hateful or whatever. You're seeing it through the eyes of the Yidam. So that's cultivating compassion of all sentient beings, or for all sentient beings, that leads us as a cause to bodhicitta. And then the 4th one is the inspiration of a spiritual master. So we talked a little bit about that above, where it said to fully attend of a spiritual master. Here we are, the inspiration of a spiritual master. So making yourself available to the spiritual master so that the spiritual master can interact with you, can engage with you, that you attend the teachings, that you attend the practices, that you hang around after the practices. You hang around on a day where maybe nobody else is around. You say, I'm just going to go visit my spiritual master, my spiritual teacher, and just hang out with him for today. or take them out to lunch, or let's go to the park and let's take a walk or something like that. You know, so it's in these kinds of environments, that's not in the shrine room, not actually engaged in a practice or a study, that many times you learn more from those experiences than you learn when you are in the shrine room, because you're seeing how an enlightened, or more, let's say, a more enlightened person than you might be, how they conduct their lives, what they say to you, or what they don't say to you, and the jibber jabber that you're trying to engage with them, and they're just blowing you off, but they're not pushing you away. They're just not engaging in the jibber jabber conversation, and you realize, well, why is he not talking to me? I'm making perfect sense. I'm making jokes. I'm doing this. And they may not be even paying any attention to you, because they've reached that point. They say, oh, I'm just hearing that wonk, 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 wonk coming from this guy that I'm walking along the trail with. So we learn a lot by exposing ourselves to the spiritual master in these ways. So these are the causes for the cultivation of bodhicitta. So we're taking our time going through these pages, going through these teachings, which are, have come from the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, just outlined. There's much more in the book itself that you can read and everything. But the point I'm trying to make is that we take these things for granted. We don't really study these things, and we don't understand what jewels these are. This is the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. This is how you attain liberation. This is the jewel. These are the ornaments that you put on your tree. So if you want to use another analogy, the mandala, we talked about as a palace, you can think of it as a tree with all these different branches. When we do the 7 branches, the 7-branch prayer, it's this tree with these 7 branches. And now we're taking all these beautiful ornaments, like Christmas ornaments, that we're hanging on it. These bits of wisdom. So part of what we're doing here is helping you to recognize this and to employ this in your own development, cultivation of bodhicitta, and being on the path of Dharma. So one of the great masters is Asanga. So it says here in this next section, it says, as said by Asanga in the Ornament of Mahayana Sutras. So Asanga was a great master. He wrote some great books, composed some great teachings, and so on. And he says, in relative bodhicitta, he's explaining relative bodhicitta. I need my magnifying glass. It says, this is the inspiration of the spiritual master. So he's being, so he's saying, due to the power of friends, the power of cause, and the power of the root, the power of hearing or through virtuous tendencies, bodhicitta appears stable or unstable when it arises from the proper ceremony conducted by others. So what this is saying is, by taking in what the teachers have, what our friends have to say to us, and then, taking apart, putting it back together again, understanding all these component parts and so on, bodhicitta appears as stable or unstable. So we see it as either being, oh yes, I understand this, or, oh my goodness, I really don't get it. It's unstable to me. It's still a mystery to me. I'm not comprehending it enough. I recognize that. So, but by engaging with this process, we're recognizing that. So the stability is giving us confidence, or the instability is giving us more reason to dig back into things, to go back and learn a little bit more, to practice a little bit more. It says, the last line says, when it arises from the proper ceremony conducted by others. So I think what this means is when we are involved in the shrine room, so to speak, when we are with the masters, our living masters, our teachers, and so on, and we're involved in those ceremonies, are we getting the benefit of those ceremonies? Is it raising our consciousness? Is it raising our level of connection to the vibration that is our true nature, in which we are all connected, and so on? When it arises from the proper ceremony conducted by others, the others would be our masters, would be the Vajra masters, the indestructible masters, and the proper ceremonies would be the practices that we do, and so on. So that's relative bodhicitta. Are we seeing this? Are we seeing all this stuff that we're learning, all this knowledge and everything, as being the relative understanding that becomes our together our knowledge? When we go and we do the Sagaramati requested sutra, and we say in the second stanza, it says, do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me completely purified, all this radiance of all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the spiritual teacher, the spiritual friend, all that radiance comes into me. And do I take all this knowledge? Do I take it as food? Do I take it as drink? Do I take it peacefully and enjoy it and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed? If we look at ourselves as a metaphor of being sick, being ill, we're not being 100%, in the Dharma. We're conflicted. We have the afflictions of our emotions. We're sick. We're ill. Our conduct is poor, and so on. So in order to cure ourselves, we take the medicine of the Dharma, the medicine of the teachings. And this is what cures us through the practice. We're slowly, but steadily, we are purifying ourselves of those sicknesses, the causes of those sicknesses, the afflictions, the emotions, and so on. So when it arises from the proper ceremony conducted by others, so the ceremony of going through these purification practices. So every one of these deity yoga practices is a purification. We go through a period of purification where we're taking the old and we're annihilating it, to use that word, we're purifying it. We see what it is, and we're going to transform it. And then through the practice, we remove those impurities, and then the result of that then becomes a more pure version of who we are compared to who we were in the beginning. So this next statement that the Sangha makes is about ultimate bodhicitta, and it says, when the perfect enlightened one is pleased, when the accumulation of merits and perfect wisdom is well gathered, when there is non-conceptual thought, perfect wisdom in the Dharma, that is held to be the ultimate bodhicitta. So this perfectly enlightened one is pleased. So I want you to think about this, because when this dawned on me, it was a breakthrough. When the perfect enlightened one is pleased. Where is the perfect enlightened one? Is the perfect enlightened one out there? Is it over here? Is it somebody that's going to walk into my room? Is it someplace I'm going to go to a store and I'm going to encounter the perfect enlightened one? The perfect enlightened one is within each one of ourselves. When our Buddha, the Buddha who we are, is pleased, when we awaken our realization of that Buddha nature within ourselves, that Buddha becomes pleased. You know you touch something. You know you open something up within yourself. That Buddha is always with you, has always been with you, and will always continue to be with you. Whether you call it Buddha, or you call it Christ, or you call it God, whatever you call it, spirit, this is what it is to be a spiritual being. Now, you could argue and say, oh, there's no such thing. But then you can see people that are living their lives without that kind of understanding, without that kind of guidance, without that kind of spirituality within themselves, and the tangents in which their life goes, and the suffering, the emotions, and the confusions that they cause for themselves and they cause for other beings. So whether that being exists or not within ourselves, we find that when we adopt that conduct that is being laid out for us here, we find that we're happier and that we want to make other people happier, other beings happier. We want to protect life instead of taking life, and all the other different virtues and so on. So what's wrong with that? Even if it's just that, what's wrong with that? But in the case of this spirituality, if we're just using this imagination of all these figures and so on like that to just connote, something that cannot be explained, that's non-dual, non-conceptual, then what's wrong with that? So this perfectly enlightened one is pleased when the accumulation of merits and perfect wisdom is well gathered. So as we're doing all these good deeds, we've been reading the King of Good Actions, the King of Aspiration prayer. How do we do this? Well, it's being laid out for us. It's one of the great sutras of the Buddha. Our great teacher. And so it's being laid out for us. We can see what it is. The accumulation of merits, perfect wisdom. When there is non-conceptual thought, perfect wisdom in the Dharma. Non-conceptual thought. When we have those moments of pure meditation, pure transcendence, where there's no thought, no conceptual thoughts. It's just that space in our heart mind, our intellectual mind. When there is non-conceptual thought, perfect wisdom in the Dharma, we recognize that perfect wisdom in the Dharma, but we don't recognize it until after we have experienced that, because as we're experiencing it, there's no words, there's no thought. But then we come out of that and we come back into our intellectual brain, and then we're processing, well, what just happened? And then we're saying, oh, I experienced the Dharma. I experienced that what I've been doing is building up the wisdom of the Dharma, the pathway. And that is to be held as the ultimate bodhicitta. So the holy enlightened mind, when we experience that, we experience the Dharma, we experience the wisdom. And the wisdom, it can come with negativity and it can come with positive, because they're both on the path. It's non-dual. They come together, they do neutralize each other. And recognizing that you're facilitating that is happening within yourself. All this is part of ultimate bodhicitta. So then it says, in other words, ultimate bodhicitta is achieved by reading scripture or study, practicing, which is contemplation, and realization, which is meditation. All this is part of the relative experience we got to go through to be able to get to that ultimate bodhicitta. So, any thoughts or questions about this? How does it, Matt? How does it land on you? And to Bernie too. How has it landed on you in the past? That these things that seem so simple, you know, but to dig into these things um, really has such great meaning, such great power that we gloss over. When we don't dig into them, we take them for granted. Bernie, in your career, studying this and everything, was there a breakthrough? Was there a period when the where you might have thought before it was all very mundane and why am I talking about or listening to this and everything? But then all of a sudden you realize, wow, this stuff is incredibly powerful.
Well, okay. Well, I have to say that before I read the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, I had heard of Bodhicitta, but it was just sort of an abstract idea. And after reading the Jewel Ornament of Liberation and seeing some lamas, I understood that it was an active practice, a practice that you could apply to your life every day. We can cultivate bodhicitta. It's not something we have to, it's not just some sort of abstract concept. It's not something that's going to fall on our head from the sky, but every day we can develop love and compassion and make that love and compassion limitless. We don't limit it to people who we think are good. If I say that there's any one mistake that your typical person falls into, it's that we should only love good people and we should hate bad people, which is definitely not the idea of Buddhism. Love and compassion is for all beings. So, yeah, at a certain point, the whole idea of bodhicitta just became a practice that I could apply to my own life and inspiration when I saw it in the behavior of others. And I don't know what more to say about it than that, but it was really a turning point for me in my practice.
Very good, thank you. Matt, what's your comment on that? On is there a point that you're looking for, or has there been a point where you've seen this before, and
with bodhicitta specifically?
Yeah, we're talking about bodhicitta. Yeah.
Well, I'll say kind of where I'm at now. What I have noticed in myself recently, this is actually not just specific to bodhicitta, so indulge me, but is I feel like I've recently come more to a point where I'm allowing my I was gonna say intellect, but that's not the right word for it. It has a different kind of connotation. But like that skepticism kind of I don't know, that this kind of Western, I don't know what you'd call this thing where it's like I'm always breaking things down. Well, this can't be, this can't be. Like that's eased up in me in a way that's healthy though, not in a way of like some dumb whatever goes kind of thing. But a lot of the rigidness and that kind of cynicism and everything I've noticed recently has eased up in me in a way that's making the practice feel more natural, more fruitful, maybe more pleasurable. There's not as much of this internal dissonance. Well, I don't know, that whole thing that you've heard me drone on about with all the types of questions I've asked over the last year or whatever it might be. So that is something that I've noticed as a bit of a shift recently, and with that being drawn, even just in the last few weeks, into like to starting to explore and have more interest in the deity yoga practices, which before I was always it was interesting, but I was always kind of wanted to keep it a distance. because it wasn't clean enough for me. It wasn't as precise enough. It wasn't like, well, it's weird, this thing, and I'm, you know, I don't know if this even makes sense, but a kind of softening of my overall my ego, really, I guess, on some level. And my ego for me gets very much wrapped up in the intellect. So I guess that maybe that's a better way of putting it. So overall, a softening, and a big part of that is the actual, as I've said before, is like for me has been the actual coming to the group, and then also connecting with people in the WhatsApp group, the connecting with other people, and obviously you, Lance, of course, but just in general, and having like that kind of saturation where it's not where it's things related to Dharma that has allowed things to kind of open up. So I do feel like recently things are opening up for me in a different kind of way than I've experienced before in the past. So that's one thing I was thinking. I know that wasn't really specific to your question about bodhicitta.
No, that's right on. And can you relate it to? I don't remember. You probably have told me, but your background. What your family, how you were raised. A Christian background or whatever. Can you relate any of this to that? And can you say, "Wow, I wish that in that they had embraced more of these ideas. They explained more of these ideas in those traditions."
Um, well, I mean, one kind of ironic thing about it, I think this actually speaks to the way that you teach, to be honest, but I've grown more of appreciation for the other traditions, the other religious, spiritual traditions, and have lost my kind of like, not repulsion, the repulsing kind of thing to it, the something like that. Um, I mean, I was raised nominally Catholic. I went through the Catholic motions when I was a kid. It wasn't really important for me. My starting place and baseline is very much of the kind of the Western Enlightenment type of philosophical and scientific
Mhm.
background and worldview is
Mhm.
is very much where my baseline starting point is coming from in way of
So
viewing the
not so
world.
much the spiritual.
No, no, yeah.
But not to put words in your mouth, but now the along with the physical and the intellectual, there is the spiritual component that balances out the other two. That you can see that these three are working together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. For me, this is just particular to my conditioning or whatever. But for me, I personally don't find it helpful to try to break it out into this other thing, like the spiritual thing that's somehow different from the other thing, from the physical or the psychological. Um, but yeah, for me, I think it's more of a softening of the ego of my intellect being able to figure things out and categorize things in this way that I'm perceiving as objectively true or more precise in ways that it's really not. So it's more of that kind of thing
Okay.
for me. But yes, like an opening up and a broadening in the way that you're talking about. Although for me, I conceptualize it slightly differently.
Well, very good. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So, unless you've got something else, anything we get into is going to take us deeper into something that we can't finish. So, I'd rather just either talk some more about something or call it a night. Okay. Well, then I'll remind everybody that we're going to start the Noble Film Night uh, next Friday, not this Friday coming, but the next week, November 3rd. So we've got 2 weekends in November where we can do it. We're not going to do it on the 2 weekends where the Bumsok is going to be at Dharma Surya, and then the following week is going to be the Medicine Buddha retreat. So I sent you the flyers. If you're interested, I totally encourage everybody to come to Dharma Surya or tune into it with Zoom, but if you can, to come in person, even for an hour or come for a morning or an afternoon session or all day or the weekend, whatever you can, it's going to be very powerful. It's going to be a breakthrough for you. It's going to change things for you, no doubt. So this first film that we're going to show next week is called The Knowledge of Healing, and it has to do with Tibetan medicine. So it follows the Dalai Lama's personal Amchi, his Tibetan doctor, in coming to the Dalai Lama himself, but then also going to some other patients that he has. And then there's some other doctors. We see how this Tibetan medicine is part of the culture of that general area. And it's very interesting. You see how how some of the medicines are made and so on. So you hear quite a bit of discussion about it, and it's really an inspiring film. It's an old film, and but I think one that might give more encouragement to participate in the medicine Buddha practice and to come to the retreat and so on. That's going to be the first one that we're going to show. Then we'll take 2 weeks off, and then the next one after that is a contemporary look at the Tibetan dilemma of the new generation compared to the old generation that's in Tibet today. So I think that's going to be relevant to what we're going through as Westerners because of the cultures coming together. And what's been happening around the world is so much of the old world, so to speak, is becoming westernized. And what's being gained, what's being lost becomes a question. So this particular film kind of brings that out in the open so we can talk about that a little bit more. So I think you'll find that very interesting. And then next month in December, we should be able to do more films without an interruption each on a Friday night. So that's what I want to say. Folks on YouTube, maybe you can participate in the different things, and if you need to have information about those film night or the weekends at Dharma Surya in Virginia, just let us know by email or phone number or whatever works for you. Okay, so thank you all very much. And Matthew, you are the Umze, so would you do the dedication prayers, please?
Lineage dedication prayer. Dorje Chang, Telopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Pagmo Drupa, and Lord Drinkumpa, please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. The Korma prayer. By the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Drinkumpa Ratnashri, who is omniscient Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Dedication prayer by Lord Jingden Sungön. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of Yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara, nirvana, and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the virtue of this vast root of virtue, by the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, ah, Om. Om, ah, Om. Om, ah, Om. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Bernie. Thanks,
You're
Mark.
welcome.
See you.
Okay. See you all soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.